Good evening. This is May 19th, Wednesday night Bible study. My name is Douglas Griffin, in case you're tuning in by accident. I just want you to know what it is you're getting into so you can go on down your Facebook page to something else more interesting. We are looking in the book of Matthew. We started this last year, but we are in Matthew chapter 26. Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. Um, he's warned the disciples about what's going to happen this night, and they absolutely think it's their duty to prevent it from happening. And sometimes God warns us about something that's going to happen, and we think it's our duty to prevent that thing from happening, when actually it's just trying to prepare us in advance so that when it happens, we'll know that God knew all about it, which means God's got a way out. So sometimes you have a bad feeling about something and we'll pray it away. No, Satan, that's never going to happen. But that's actually God warning you and just letting you know, I knew this. I told you in advance it was going to happen. So see when that thing happened? Since I knew about it, I got provisions for it. I've got a way out. I've got it all taken care of. And that's kind of what Jesus continued to tell the disciples. I'm telling you in advance so that you'll know, so that when it happens, you'll believe. But they they said, no, that will never happen. And that's their mindset this night. That's why they end up doing what they did, because we're going to stop this. You're going to be the Messiah. You're going to go in there and you are going to tell those Romans what to do. And that's not at all what Jesus had in mind. And we're like that with God. God, I want you to go in there and Holy Spirit, knock them down and make them do that. And that's not what God, that's not his plan. It's not his plan. He's not going to do that. Nagada. Matthew chapter 26. Jesus has finished praying. He's gone. He said, please watch what I am doing so that when you're tempted, you can do the same thing. That's what the whole watch and pray thing was for. Watch and then pray so that you don't fall into temptation and get tempted to be crazy and paranoid. And watch how I do this. Lord, if it be possible for this cup to pass me by, then let it, but I know it can't, so your will be done. This terrible thing that I'm thinking is terrible that I'm about to face, I know it's your will. So I'm going to go ahead and embrace it. It's okay. I know that it's for my good. This is how you handle stressful situations, as opposed to fleeing them. You say, Lord, this is of you. And I know that you are not abandoning me. And so he's trying to teach the disciples. But Peter kept falling asleep. And John and James were just, what's he talking about? And the other disciples he didn't even deal with, because they were still, what does he mean he's leaving and coming back? And Jesus is, okay, I can't deal right now. So Matthew 26, verse 48 through 49, this is where we ended. Now his betrayer has given them a sign. So Judas shows up with all these people. And this is in retrospect. They didn't know this in advance. In thinking about it later, after they saw what Judas did, they realized, oh, Judas must be with them. And that kiss must have been his signal to them. But at the time, they didn't know that. They just see Judas showing up, thinking, oh, he just came from buying all the Passover food for tomorrow. It's like, surprise. I don't have food with me. I have something else. So now his betrayer had given them a sign saying, whoever I kiss, he is the one. Seize him, because Jesus did not glow. He did not have wings. He did not look with the perfect hair and beard like in all those pictures. He just looked like the average Jewish person. Couldn't tell him from anybody else. And they wouldn't know who Jesus was on purpose, because it's not about how he looked. It's what he had to say is what was coming out of his heart. So God on purpose just gave him just a normal, regular everything. So immediately he went up to Jesus and says, greeting, Rabbi, and kissed him, right? So they're not even clear that Judas is with those people. They would never think that, because that's the enemy. So Judas is not with them. That just wouldn't occur to them. They just see Judas walking up and, greetings, Rabbi. He kisses him. Now, last week I said this whole setup is very similar to 2 Samuel chapter 20. when they're leading an army, David's kind of getting his forces together against Saul, and Joab is in charge of everything. He's one of his generals. And Amasa, Anasa, Amasa, they had sent out, and now Amasa's come back. Amasa's a betrayer. He's a Judas. And in 2 Samuel chapter 20, verse 9, it says, Then Joab said to Amasa, Are you in health, my brother? And Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. But Amasa did not notice the sword that was in Joab's hand, and he stuck him with it in the stomach. And his entrails poured out on the ground, and he did not strike him again. Didn't have to, because those swords are pretty big. And he died. So he was, but that's because Amasa was betrayed. This is kind of like the opposite with Jesus. But that whole, I'm kissing you with my lips, but my hand's about to stab you. They smiling in your face, but all the time they want to take your place. The backstabbers. Oh, remember that guy said, I'm not a backstabber, I'm a front stabber. You got to watch out for people, right? So Matthew 26:50, verse 50. So even after the kiss, Jesus says to him, Friend, why have you come? Now, Jesus is not asking because he doesn't know. He wants Judas to think, why are you here? Think about the bigger picture, because sometimes we only look at things in the moment and we don't see the bigger picture, right? When Hagar was upset because Sarah gave her a funny look and Hagar left, she'd gotten pregnant, and and she had given Sarah a funny look, and Sarah gave her a look back and let her know, I'm not the one. And so Hagar left. And so she's in the desert. And in Genesis 16, verse 7, it says, Now the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. So she's on her way to Egypt. And he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, where have you come from and where are you going? And he wants her to think, where have you come from? You think you just came from a mean woman, but step back bigger than that. You came from a family where you've seen miracles happening. You know that God has been providing for Abraham and blessing him. You've seen him. So look back bigger than just that one moment and see the bigger picture. You've come from under God's umbrella and God's blessing. And where are you going? You're going to go back to Egypt where you were a slave? You think, I'm leaving that hateful woman, I'm going to go back to my friend. No, you're walking back into this terrible life where they mistreated you and abused you, and you were a slave in Egypt. So think. But the angel of the Lord's not saying, where are you going? Because he doesn't know. He really wants you to think. And Jesus gives Judas that moment. Friend, why have you come? Why are you? Think about it. Why are you here? In your mind, you're mad at me because I keep talking about my death instead of talking about taking over the Romans. But if you think I'm the Messiah, think about why you're here. I have come to put the Messiah to death. Is that what you really want to do? Think about it. Friend, why have you come? Think bigger. And if we could all do that, we wouldn't act so abruptly sometimes. If we could think bigger than that moment. You step on foot. Think bigger than that, Okay. Here's how John wrote it, because John, in his gospel, he's there, right? He was there. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are hearing it firsthand from someone and writing it down, but John is the firsthand. So here's in his version, John chapter 18, verse 4. It says, Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that would come upon him, went forward and said to them, and he's talking to everybody, not just obviously to Judas, whom are you seeking? Think about it now. Who are you looking for? Who do you think that I am, right? And that's what all the world will stand on trial for. Who do you think Jesus is? Who are you seeking? And they answered him, it says, Jesus of Nazareth. So Jesus said to them, I am. Now in the King James it says I am he. They add in the he. He didn't say I am he. He just said I am. And it says, and Judas who betrayed him also stood with him. And now when he said to them, I am, there's no he, they drew back and fell to the ground. It knocked them out. The power of this knocked them out. And when we go through the book of John, I'll go into more detail about that. But that's what Moses asked God when he was in the burning bush. Moses wasn't in the burning bush. God was. Get out that bush, God, stop burning. But he was in that bush, and the bush looked like it was on fire, but it wasn't, right? And he says, who can I say sent me? And he's tell them that I am sent you. I am. And so these are powerful words to the Jews, right? And the force of that knocked them back. Because the great I am is who you're coming after, and he's giving everybody a chance to repent. This is your final, before horrible things come upon you. I really want to give you an opportunity. This is your hour to really understand the weight and consequences of what you're about to do. And God does that with all of us. And we'll go right past the stop sign sometimes, but God always gives us a stop sign. No, I'm upset. I'm going to tell that person or whatever it is that we're about to do. He gives us a moment, here's your last chance to really reflect about what you're about to say or what you're about to do, so you can really understand the full consequences of what's about to happen here. So then he asked them again, after they all fell to the ground, whom are you seeking? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus answered it, I have told you that I am. So I know who you think you're just coming to get a man, but I'm telling you, I am God, right? Therefore, if you seek me, let these go their way. Like, leave the disciples alone. Don't arrest them, but know what you're doing. He says, therefore, if you seek me, let these go their way. This is still John chapter 18, but this is verse 9. That the saying might be filled which he spoke, of those whom you gave me, I have lost none. So he's protecting his disciples, even though they're about to take him off to crucify him. So now so he didn't just say to Judas, friend, while you're here, he also addressed the crowd, but no one told Matthew that, but John knew it. Okay. So back to Matthew chapter 26, second part of verse 50. Then they came and they laid hands on Jesus and they took him. So you feel free to take me. I don't have a problem with that. Just don't bother them. And suddenly, here's in Matthew's version, one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. I wonder who that was. So yes, who could that have been? So Matthew just said one of those. But John says, I'm going to tell it. John loved to tell exactly who everybody was talking about. Now, John's gospel was written last. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew, Mark, and Luke had already written. Mark was actually the first one, and then Matthew, then Luke. John read their versions of what happened, and he fills in all the stories that aren't there. So Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they just coincide. There's the synoptic gospels because you can read them together. They're called the synoptics. But John is not part of that because John is everything they didn't say. So John read, and one took out a sword. And so John said, oh, no. We know who it was. So in John chapter 18, verse 10, it says, then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. So let me just tell you exactly who it was. None of this. And then one did it. No, I want you to know. And it says, and he cut off his right ear. It says the servant's name was Malchus. So he wants you to know who it was. John identifying everybody. Simon Peter did it. And let me tell you what the guy's name was. Now, one reason that he wants you to know who it was, because we're going to run into this guy's brother a little later, and he's not going to be happy. Did you cut off my brother's ear? So they want you to know it was Malchus. All right. So Jesus said to Peter, put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which my Father has given me? Should I not drink it? Are you trying to Why do you keep trying to stop stuff? So they were, again, Jesus is saying all these things must happen, and they're saying, no, it doesn't. And, hello. But God is telling us, you're going to have to go through that. We're going, no, we don't. I can name it and claim it, and I can wish it away, and and I don't have to. Yes, there are certain things you're going to have to go through because I want you to, because it's going to be good for you. If your trainer showed up and says, "Okay, I want you to do these push-ups," I want you to, oh no, the weight will just fall off. No, it won't. You got to stop doing this. I'm going to make you. You got to do this, and And there's certain things that God's going to put us through, um, to help us. And we don't want to go through it. Who wants to do push-ups or whatever it is? But God knows what will make us stronger. So that's the purpose. Not to God to just do stuff willy-nilly. I think I'll strike you with make you blue. Everything God does, because He's that loving Father, is for our good. Okay, makes us stronger. So I not drink the cup which my Father's given me. Should I not drink the? What's wrong with you? Why are you trying to stop this? Did you not hear me say, if this cup, I give it to me? I said every prayer I ended with give me the cup, and you're trying to stop. Why is no one? Hello, is this mic on? No one's listening to me. Okay, so Luke says, and I'll get back to Matthew, but Jesus answered and said, permit even this. And He touched his ear and He healed them. So allow this, Peter. I know you just cut off somebody's ear because you're crazy. Now, Peter is not Mike Tyson. He was not aiming for the ear. He was trying to chop this guy's head off. He just wasn't very good. And he just got the ear because the guy ducked, because it's hard to hide a sword once it's coming out. Like, I think he's got a sword and about to swing it. So he got the guy's ear, because when did disciples ever use swords? They never used swords. They had two. It says they had two swords between them, but they never used. But you were smart if you kept a sword, especially if you were traveling to Jerusalem. There were a lot of robbers and thieves during this time of year, because humans have not changed in thousands of years. And if there's going to be a big festival and a lot of rich people eating a lot of food and coming for Passover and a lot of money changing hands, the thieves say, thank you, hallelujah, Lord. And they say that for what you have brought to us. And so you take your sword with you to Jerusalem at this time. So that's why they had the swords. But Peter's going to bring it out and cut this guy's ear off. Luke's the only one that mentions that Jesus healed the man's ear. Luke is a physician, and that detail stuck out to him when he recorded the stories, right? Luke interviewed the disciples, he interviewed Paul, all these different people, and wrote down exactly what happened. And so certain details stick out to you and others just go over your head. Back to the thing. So, yes, Jesus healed the man after Peter pulled out that sword, but Jesus said to him, put your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. That's Matthew 26:52. So he's saying that's not how we handle these kind of situations. Put your sword back. If you're going to use a sword, then the sword's going to come. Whatever you sow, you're going to reap. Jesus is basically saying. Plus, that's not the rule. In 2 Corinthians 10, verse 3, it says, For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. I mean, we're in the fleshly body, but that's not how we handle things. In Ephesians chapter 6, Paul, who was a good listener, again, Paul was a Pharisee. Paul was there. He heard everything Jesus said. He just hated it at the time, but later he's able to spit it out because he was hearing it. He was hearing it. Paul in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12 says, For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. So my fight's not with that person. We keep thinking it is. It's not with that person. It's the spirit behind that person. You got to get on your knees when somebody's making you crazy. You got to pray about it. They're not the problem. It's the spirit behind that person. And so we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. There's demons and spirits out there that really is the enemy that we've got to break their stronghold. So you got to go in prayer. The devil's stirring stuff up, and that's why this is happening. Stop trying to fight that person. We have to do it on our knees in prayer, right? So therefore, it says, take up the whole armor of God. This is Ephesians 6, 12, 13, 14. Ephesians 6, right. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand. And in the evil day, having done all, to stand. So that's the goal, is that you'll be able to stand. So you have to put on the whole armor of God. He talks about all of our weapons. They're not carnal, but they're mighty to God to the pulling down of strongholds, right? They're the faith and the word of God and the prayer. And he just mentions all these different, that's what our armor is against the wiles of the devil. That's how we fight. But sit and get mad at somebody, cutting out, what is, so Peter was going to go through and just cut off ear by ear down the, and how's that going to stop them from taking Jesus? They couldn't hear Jesus, but they could certainly, they'll grab him. So, but that's what we're just as silly. We're going to one by one take on these. That's not the problem, right? There's a bigger problem than that. So we have to understand the hour and that we're in and take advantage of it. We have to get it. We have to look at the bigger picture. That's all this lesson is about, looking at the bigger picture. So Matthew chapter 26, verse 53. So Jesus is still yelling at Peter for attacking this guy. And he says, or do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels? Like, you don't, hello, I could, if that was the plan to fight everybody, I would say, Lord, send your angels down and attack them. If that's what we have to figure out what God's plan is, because people are pissing us off and making us. But is God's plan for you to attack them? If that was the plan, Jesus says, I'd have 12 legions of angels. Let me tell you. Let me remind you what one angel can do. What one angel can do, because he's talking about 12 legions of angels. In 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 35. 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 35, it says, and it came to pass on a certain night that the angel of the Lord went out and killed in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when people arose early in the morning, there were the corpses, all dead. So in one night, one angel killed 185,000 people. So you can imagine 12 legions of them, thousands of angels. It's like, please, there's no contest. If that was the plan, Peter, for us to one-on-one attack these people, you think I'm helping. And we always try to defend God. We try to help God out. We're going to defend God. We're going to whip out our sword and I'll help you, God. And we're going to tear down those people and carry our signs. You're going to, and God's like, that's not the plan. That's not the plan. You need to check with me, find out what the plan is. So, because we're ready for a good fight. And so we have to understand the hour. What's the bigger picture? What is God doing in the hour? Judas, why are you here? Hagar, why are you running? Think, stop before you act. Think, see what God is doing in this hour, right? So, Matthew 26, verse 54. He says, how then could the scripture be fulfilled that this must happen? So, why are you doing? You're not reading the Bible, and we don't read the Bible. I've heard the Bible misquoted all the time, and we just shape it into what we want it to be. And there are a bunch of scriptures that people just pass over because they're not convenient. They don't fit their theology. That's why I love going verse by verse by verse by verse, because I can't skip all the inconvenient scriptures where it says God did this and God did this. I would love to cut them all out of the Bible and just go all to all the wonderful scriptures. And God will make you a millionaire and you get a car and you get a car. That would be fantastic. But we have to look at the whole Bible. And Jesus is saying these scriptures have to be fulfilled. They're in the Bible. So you're trying to stop these scriptures from being fulfilled. This is part of the Bible. Peter, hello. How then could the scriptures be fulfilled that it must happen? And in that hour, Jesus said to the multitude. So now he's talking to the Romans. Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I mean, what? Who? Like, you're sending the riot police against me? I don't get it. He says, I sat daily with you teaching in the temple and you did not seize me. So now that I'm by myself with these guys who are up in this, this grove here, now you come out with 600, it was between 200 and 600 guards, depending on what term you're using and which person you believe. It was either 200 soldiers or there were 600 of them with clubs and swords and lanterns. It's like, you're coming against, you could seize me anytime when I was in the temple.
The whole Frankenstein crew.
Yeah, the Frankenstein people were there. We found him. You thought he got away. So Jesus is like, why are you spending so much energy? You haven't read the scriptures either. You're not understanding what hour this is. So Jesus said to the multitudes, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I sat daily with you teaching the temple, and you did not seize me. Here's Luke's, I don't want to say his version of it, but here's what Luke wrote down of what the people told him he said. He says, when I was with you daily in the temple, you did not try to seize me, but this is your hour and the power of darkness. So in Luke's gospel, he didn't just say, you could have got me at those times, but this is your hour and the power of darkness. So you don't. So God, here's what's good about that hour. God is stepping back and letting Satan fall into his trap. He's stepping back. Okay, Satan, do what you think you got to do. You're so dumb. You don't know that that's exactly what I want you to do. And the good news is it's only an hour. But God's saying, okay, this is their hour. Let them go ahead and do what they got to do. In John chapter 14, verse 28, Jesus was putting it this way. He says, you have heard me say to you, I am going away and coming back to you. Now, if you loved me, you would rejoice because I said I'm going to the Father. For my Father is greater than I. And that's a pretty interesting statement. If you loved me and you knew where I was going, and my wife says this a lot when she's counseling people who've lost a loved one. She says, they've had a glimpse of heaven. They've seen Jesus. They wouldn't come back. they saw glory. So we miss them. We wish they were here. But it's like, child, if you saw what I saw, you'd be so happy for me. You'd be applauding. Look where you are. They're where we want to go. And we're all going to, so they've got a glimpse of glory. And so they say, I should have seen Jesus. Remember that commercial? You saw the box. They shouldn't have seen Jesus. So then I can't stay. I know you want me to stay, but I got to go. I've seen Jesus. I said, Jesus says, if you love me, you would rejoice because I said I'm going to my Father. And you'd be like so happy because he's greater than I. He's the Father. He controls the universe. Why would I not want to run into his arms? The person who has the universe in his hands. So you should be happy that I'm going to the Father. If you really loved me, if you love yourself, then you're like, no, don't leave. But if you love me, you want what's best for me. And I'm telling you where I'm going. And in fact, he said, I'm going to prepare a place for you so that where I'm going, you can be there too. So it's not a problem. It's like, yay, you'll be glad that I went and scouted this out ahead for all of us. He says, and now I have told you before it comes, that when it does come to pass, you may believe. So I'm telling you so that when it happens, you won't think, oh no, it all messed up. You'll go, wow, God already prepared me for this. I knew this was going to happen. I'm good. This is great. God's got it. And that's how we have to look at a lot of stuff that we want to consider bad news. We want to say, no, God knew about this. This is not bad news. I want to step back and see the bigger picture, right? Step back and see the bigger picture of what God is doing. It looks dour, but it's not. It can't be because God knew all about it. So, it looks horrible to me. God's got the situation. So he says, I told you before it comes that when it does come to pass, you may believe. This is John chapter 14, verse 28, 29, now verse 30. He says, I will no longer talk much with you, for the ruler of this world is coming. So I'm going to talk less now because this is his hour. That's what he says to them. This is your hour. So I'm going to submit and let you grab me and do your thing. I'm hoping you'll step back and look at the bigger picture and really understand what you're doing. Who is it that you're taking? Think about that. But I know you're not going to listen, but I'm giving you the opportunity to listen. But I'm stepping back. But this hour is yours. And God says, okay, go ahead, Satan. He says, for the ruler of this world is coming, but he's found nothing in me. What does he mean by that? He means let me, here in John chapter 8, verse 29, it says, he who sent me is with me. The Father has not left me alone, for I always do those things that please him. So the one who sent me is also with me. And if I hope we can get that God sends us someplace, he's with us there. Somebody else sends us, they're not with us anymore. That's why they send us. Girl, go to the store and get me an apple. They're not with. but God sends you and also goes with you. He says, and I do always those things that please him. So I've never given the devil an inch to get in and cause any havoc. Everything that is happening right now is according to plan because I always do the things that please God. So the devil has nothing in me. He can't, on judgment day, he can't say, Jesus threw up on that nun. He can't, there's nothing that the Satan will be able to say against me. And therefore, I know that each step that I take is ordered by God, and I haven't left an inch for the devil to get in and sow confusion, right? And so all of this is according to, hey, disciples, calm down. If this is happening, it's according to God's will. This is not some confusion. This is exactly what I said would happen. John 12, verse 31 says, now is the judgment of this world. Now the rule of this world will be cast out. So this is judgment time for this world. They're standing there on trial for this age. It doesn't mean this earth, but for this age, the people in this age, they're standing before the judge of all, and they're either going to make the right decision or they're going to say crucify him, and so this is that hour. But when it happens, here's the trick: Satan loses. Satan thinks, I got him on the cross. I crucified him. Like, hello. So he says, now is the judgment of this world. Now the rule of this world be cast out. He says, but if I am lifted up from the earth, I'll draw all people to myself. So when I'm crucified, that's when I win. Don't you understand that that's the plan? That's the plan. Me on that cross is the good news. That has to happen. Devil thinks it's the bad news. And Joseph said that to his brothers when they were bowing in front of him, and once he was a ruler in Egypt. He says, I don't know if he didn't say the devil meant this for good, but you meant this for bad, but God knew this was for good. This was good that this happened, that I'm here in Egypt right now because I'm able to save you. So what I've interpreted as a bad thing, oh man, my brother sold me off to Egypt, and oh no, God was way ahead of that and has actually worked it out for good. In fact, all things work together for good to them who love the Lord, who are the called. They all work according to his purpose. So we just have to look at all these things and say, okay, God's not going, oh man, it messed up. What am I going to do? Oh no. It's like, this will all work out for my good, for my purpose. Don't you worry. Just sit there and listen to my voice and I'll be able to talk you through it. So back to Matthew 26, verse 56. But this was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. So they all ran off. They said, well, we're not having it. So, because they thought they were losing. Like, oh my God, they just grabbed Jesus and they took him off and they were out of there, not understanding this is exactly how it's supposed to happen. Now, I'm so excited because I have 5 minutes left. I'm going to tell you this. I was hoping I'd be able to get to this. So I got to this, James Troop. So here's what happened right after the disciples forsook him and fled. In Mark chapter 14, Mark adds this little piece. Now, Mark got his information from Peter. At the end of Peter's life, Mark was there in prison with him and wrote all this stuff down, and Peter told him all the stories. So here's what Mark says happened. So Jesus says, I was daily with you in the temples teaching, Mark chapter 14, verse 49. And you did not seize me, but the scriptures must be fulfilled. It says, verse 50, then they all forsook him and fled. Now here's the next thing that happened. Matthew doesn't have it, but Mark does. It says, now a certain man followed him. So all the disciples have run off. Peter's not even there yet, or is he? Peter's probably, remember, Peter followed Jesus. So he goes off, but then Peter starts to follow. But this other guy, and they don't say, Mark doesn't say who it was. Now a certain young man followed him, having a linen cloth thrown around his naked body. And the young men, the guards, they laid hold of him. So when they saw who it was, they grabbed him. And he left the linen cloth and fled from them naked. Now this is just an odd things that Mark puts in. And no one else had. Mark, John doesn't have it. Matthew doesn't have it. Luke doesn't have it. Peter knew about it and told Mark. Some people think that this was Mark himself, that Mark was living nearby, and that he went out and he heard this ruckus and saw Jesus and then tried to help, and then they grabbed him. I don't think it was Mark. I have another theory about who it is, because this word linen cloth, he was in a linen cloth. In every single other scripture in the Bible, every other time this word is used in the Bible, it stands for grave clothes. It's the clothes that you use to wrap a body. Like in Matthew chapter 27, verse 57 through 59, it says, "Now when evening had come, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who himself had also become a disciple of Jesus. This man went to Pilate and asked him for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate commanded the body to be given to him. And when Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped him in a clean linen cloth." Is that same word, sindon, S-I-N-D-O-N. That same word. Every time this word is in the Bible, it means grave clothes. It's always in that context. This one time, I believe it's still in that context. A lot of people change and say, well, maybe he was a really rich person, just running out there who had bought all this fancy linen, because that's not what you normally wear. It's for bodies when you wrap them up. So I'm like, who would be in grave clothes just wandering around? Well, in John chapter 11, right 2 days before this, right? 6 days before this, I'm sorry, because there's only a few people who lived in that area. It was somebody who lived in that Bethany area near the Mount of Olives. In John chapter 11, verse 43, it says, "Now when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, 'Lazarus, come forth!' And he who had died came out bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with the cloth. And Jesus said to him, 'Loose him and let him go.'" So not too long before that, Lazarus had just come out and wrapped in his grave clothes. In Matthew 26, verse 7, it says, "When Jesus was in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, a woman came to him having an alabaster flask of very costly fragrant oil, and she poured it on his head, and she sat at the table." Now, Matthew, Mark, and Luke do not identify who this woman was. John says who it is because John's going to tell it. Plus, John wrote his gospel that came out years after some of these people were dead. So they were no longer in danger. And that's why Mary and Martha's names were hidden if you read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, because that family was still being hunted. Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were still being hunted. But by the time John's gospel came out, the people who were looking for them were already dead. So in John chapter 12, verse 1 and 3, it says, "Then 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany," this is right near the Mount of Olives, "where Lazarus was, who had been dead." They had a house there, "whom he had raised from the dead. There they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of those who sat at the table with him." I see Lazarus still just wrapped in his grave clothes. In my mind, Lazarus is just sitting there. It doesn't say that at all, but it's like, I was in the grave. I was dead, and then they wrapped me, and then I came out, and I looked, and I'm not letting go of these clothes because I can't believe I'm alive. Supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was at the table with him. Then Mary took a pound of very costly oil of spikenard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. So he identifies that it was Mary. That this was the family where this stuff happened, but Matthew, Mark, and Luke don't say who these people are because they don't want to give away where they lived, because people were trying to kill them. They had decided. In John chapter 12, verse 9 through 11, it says, "Now a great many of the Jews knew that he was there talking about Jesus." But it says, "And they came not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. But the chief priests plotted to put Lazarus to death also, because on account of him, many of the Jews went away and believed on Jesus." So their family was marked for death. So Lazarus, Martha, Mary, their identities were hidden. The disciples didn't give away where they lived because they were still mad. And they're trying to kill Lazarus. So some disciple who loved them some Jesus even when they took him from Bethany, from Calvary, came down the hill, they're passing by Bethany on their way to Caiaphas and Annas and that whole group, and some disciple came out who they won't identify, wrapped in grave clothes, and when they saw him, it says they grabbed him. They almost let go of Jesus to grab this person. So it's got to be somebody that they were on the lookout for. And then this person ran off naked. Who crazy like that? Well, Peter is, certainly, but it wasn't Peter. I love to think that it was Lazarus. Who knows? But this is just something that Mark put in as Peter saw it. Because right after this, that guy ran away naked. Then Peter walks up and he follows Jesus, and we will continue from there next week. But it's just a really interesting, funny incident that Mark put in his book that nobody else saw except Peter saw. So Peter knows who it was. And it could have, maybe it's either Mark himself who didn't want to identify, or it was Lazarus and they couldn't tell anybody. Okay, so I'm stopping there. Thank you so much again for this listening to this craziness on Wednesday night Bible study. I'll see again some of you here on Facebook, not at church, on Facebook at 9 o'clock. And then the rest of you can tune in anytime. You can tune in at 11. It'll be there where we're in the book of Genesis. Rachel and Leah are still trying to see how many kids they can outdo each other with. And that's where we're going to go from there on. Okay, again, thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you. I will see you next week. And video.